Welcome to another episode of Coffee with Samso. We're back at Blacksmith Perth in Highgate. I've got Peter Canterbury from Triton Minerals here talking about graphite in Africa. Peter, maybe just give us an intro, who you are.
Yeah, so Peter Canterbury, I'm the MD of Triton Minerals. We had a long history in the mining industry, firstly with Alcoa for about 12 years, then went to a private group out of London who had the alumina refinery, and then later on a bauxite mine in Guinea, and then went to Sundance Resources for 6 years, negotiated the mining convention and development convention for the integrated mine rail port facilities, and spent 3 years at Bauxite Resources, the joint venture with Yankuang Resources, the guys behind Yancoal, trying to develop a bauxite project up in near Qingdao. I was asked in 2016 to join Triton Minerals, which is a developing graphite company with 3 projects in northern Mozambique, in a very rich graphite area, and since that time I've spent trying to develop that. We've gone through a whole ream of development activities, and we're now really well placed to now go into the actual development construction, and now with the recent transaction we've just announced.
I mean, I was curious with you guys. I mean, I want to get you to talk really about the graphite business, graphite market, because really, I mean, we discussed this early on, like not a lot of people really understand what it is, you know. It sort of went along well, and then everyone's happy, and then graphene came along, and then graphene wasn't the thing anymore, and graphite is back.
So I've had to, because of my background was really in bulk commodities, I've had to learn about graphite and what's important. There's a lot of publicity about the battery and the EV market, and it is a really long term. It will be a huge growth driver for graphite globally. And what's important for the EV market is grade. Concentrate needs to be usually 395 or 49, so 99.99. It doesn't need to be large flake. It's dominated by China, but the market is expected to double for graphite requirements in batteries over the next 10 years. Everyone talks about a lithium-ion battery, but it's actually a graphite anode battery. There's more graphite than lithium or cobalt in there, and so demand for that is good, but it is a fine graphite that needs to go in there. The areas which is away from what the publicity is for graphite, it's also used in for flame retardants and heat resistance. So everyone's mobile phone and everything that has a battery has a graphite foil on there to stop the radiation of heat.
Oh, okay.
And you've seen recent fires also in London, in Melbourne, Dubai, everywhere around the world with cladding. The issues with that, it doesn't have a flame retardant in that cladding. If you put a 5% graphite with the polyethylene inside that cladding, those fires wouldn't happen.
Okay.
So, and the market for that in China alone is estimated they need about 40 million tonnes of flame retardants per year in building materials. At 5%, that's a lot. That's 2 million tonnes of graphite a year needed to sustain that. I don't think it's going to be quite like that immediately, but it's a real growth area. But for the graphite market, what's important for flame retardants is it needs to be large flake, high purity graphite. And it needs to be what they call expandable graphite. So expandable graphite is a flake of graphite, which is the intercalated. It then you by mixing sulfuric acid in it. Wash it out, heat it up to 950 degrees Celsius, and it will just grow like a crystalline structure. It will grow ours roughly about 500 millilitres per gram. So it is, and as soon as it's heated, you can touch it. It's got fantastic thermal properties, and that's then ground, or it goes into flame retardants, or can go into foils for your phone by being rolled, goes into nuclear facilities. And our project at Ankuabe is the most developed large flake graphite project in the world outside of China. And China is running out of large flake graphite. Shandong province has previously been the only large flake graphite producing area in China. They're diminishing, and it's not coincidence that two of our binding contracts are with large flake graphite producers in Shandong who are running out of large flake graphite.
Is graphite like every other sort of commodity where China has lots of it and we all don't? Does it fall into that category?
So graphite isn't a particularly rare commodity, but it's the properties that are interesting. So China dominates currently. Before Syrah came on board, it produced 85% of the world's graphite. It still probably produces now, with Syrah coming on, 70% of the world's graphite.
This is China.
China.
Yeah.
But it has two issues. It's one, running out of large flake graphite, but also most of the graphite that they produce out of normal mechanical flotation only sits at 90 to 93% grade. It then needs toxic chemicals to upgrade it. So they use hydrofluoric acid in treating it, and then they don't deal with that water treatment very well. And that's why you've seen a lot of closures, a lot of environmental issues in there. We can get our graphite at Ankuabe up to 97, average grade of 97.5 just through mechanical flotation. And that's one of the advantages of the East African graphite projects, that they liberate quite easily into high purity graphite. Ankuabe has the added advantage that it is a large flake graphite deposit. So 60% of our graphite from a test work comes out large flake size and above, which is perfect for expandable graphite. Whereas Syrah is predominantly fine flake, suitable for the battery market. But it needs further treatment as well to go into that battery market. So we're not targeting the battery market. What we're targeting is the expandable graphite market, and the pricing for that is about 3 times what the fine flake graphite prices are. So it is a very lucrative market. There's very few who can supply it. There's a number of projects in East Africa, and most of them which have large flake are in Tanzania, which has some challenges with the government now. And the advantage we have with our Ankuabe graphite project is that we're fully permitted. We have now announced recently a transaction which sees us essentially funded through construction, and which so makes us the most likely be the next large flake graphite producer in the world.
In terms of location, I know there's a big LNG project happening nearby. Two, right?
So to have Exxon and E&I are doing a floating LNG up about 300 kilometres north of Pemba. And then you've got Anadarko, who's doing an onshore LNG facility. So total investments in excess of $50 to $60 billion in the gas gas side up there.
That Pemba is the port where they're bringing everything in. Is
Yes,
that the one?
that is true. All the major gas contractors now have offices sitting up at Pemba, and that's the port we'll take our graphite out. There's a container port there that's 80 kilometres by sealed road from our project at Anguilla.
Because when I was looking at your map, obviously, you I think logistically you look okay. And then the fact that I know I was a shareholder of another company who deals with recruitment, RBR Group or something.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, yeah.
We're a shareholder of them.
Ah, okay. So I got talking to them and understand how things work there. So that's why I felt comfortable in terms of whether this is going to, I mean, nobody will know whether this will ever work, but likelihood that I look at the infrastructure and what they tell me about the sort of sovereign risk issue and things like that. I mean, it's quite low and seems manageable and everything seems to be working. You got the big LNG thing happening, so, you know.
Yeah, so in terms of as a place to develop, and I've operated in numerous countries in Africa. Mozambique is a very good place. You talk to the insurers, their sovereign risk ratings are quite low for Mozambique. One is it has an existing mining industry. It's on a second mining code. Vale operates there, South 32 operate there, so you've got big groups that are operating there. The government is very supportive, so you have Siren, who's got a mining concession. The president opened the Siro facility, and right next door, which people I don't think associate, is Germany's largest graphite products producer. Has a small graphite mine and processing unit at Anguilla right next to us. They produce about 6,000 tonnes per annum for their own internal purposes, and the reason it's located at Anguilla is because it is known from previous mining in there that it is a wonderful large flake high purity graphite that's produced from there. So and the president opened that as well. So you've got a government who's supportive of development. You've got the gas projects that are being developed. So the president has seen what's happened in Tanzania and said, you know, we are open for business. We're going to support our mining industry because it is a way of getting income into the country, which they need.
No, I think. I mean, I'm sort of. I'll never work in Africa. I'm sort of allergic to Africa, just because it's just too hard, you know. Especially when you're in a small cap company. When we raised $3 million, if you go to Africa, my opinion was that it's going to be very expensive, etc., etc. Anyway, so when I look at projects from here in Africa, first thing I look at is logistic. You know, great, the story is great, yeah, you can dig it out, but can you get out at what cost? And then when I looked at your stuff there, I thought, it's almost stone's throw from the map, from the port. In Mozambique, I sort of have obviously a lot of knowledge from RBR and all this, what's happening there. Graphite is, I don't know, I keep hearing a bit more about graphite. Maybe there's a momentum shift. But yeah, it
is. It's so logistically, and I've spent all my life in mining and resources, and logistics plays a huge part in it. And so logistically, we're really well positioned. The port is a container port, plenty of capacity. It's not the best container port in the world, but it's got capacity and it's sufficient for what we need. It's only 80 kilometres, so we're the closest graphite project in East Africa to a port, and there's existing road, that sealed road from the edge of our tenement through to the port. So we're, well positioned. We don't have to build infrastructure to do that. So we've got good grade good quality in terms of expandability, close to port. We've now got 50% of our production sold. So Ankuabe is a 60,000 tonne per annum operation that is planned. It will produce 60% large flake size and above, including 32% jumbo, 97.5% grade, and so we've got 50% of that sold by binding contracts to 2 Chinese graphite producers.
You have that, did you say?
We've got binding contracts in
okay.
place. We have appointed MCC International as and signed the EPC contract. They've been able to reduce the capital cost from $99 million in the DFS to around estimated to be at $85 million. They brought along EPC buyer's credit financing, which our new partners, Jinan High-Tech, have agreed to partially guarantee. So that helps that funding. That's at concessionary interest rates, and we're also, Jinan High-Tech are going to provide the financing support by using their leasing company to provide lease financing. And now we're talking interest rates at 6%, you know, for a mining project in Africa. So we're now essentially fully financed. We don't need to go to the market for equity. We are now got a program where it's an 18-month construction time, and we've designed it based on a modular design to lower the risk. So we've done a very simplified processing plant, which is based on existing flotation technology. I've had a very experienced metallurgist run all of our project and run all of our test work, and we've been we've got good results from that, and we own the process design, but we've made it very similar to other metal processing, flotation processing. So execution risk is low. Most of the equipment comes from China because China is the largest processor of graphite in the world, and so there's a lot of technology that sits in there. We'll use that equipment coming from there. So it'll be a modular design, shipped to site, put together at site, and so the execution risks and the process risks are low.
From an investor point of view, I mean, I've just known about your company. I've read about it. I thought, no, this is pretty good. You know, story's good. You got basically the Chinese groups come in. You're well funded, like I say, you're financed, everything else. And I look at your price chart and I'm going, what's happened here?
It's I think part of the disconnect is the last couple of years have been difficult for juniors in the space.
Yeah.
If you're not a gold company, you probably struggle. What people have always, challenged us in the past was to say you need to get all your permits in place. Then after we've got that, you need to have your financing. So what the recent announcement, I don't think people have got the idea that we're now essentially fully financed.
This is that run in July, was it?
Yeah, when we announced it, 28th of June, we announced the transaction.
Yeah.
And it's then just people. It has to go through shareholder approval.
Yeah.
So this won't be approved until the end of September, close to the end of September. It needed it because Jinan High-Tech are taking over Shandong Tian's 19.3% interest, but they're also investing another to take their shareholding up to 34%. So
in the company.
Yep. So they'll sit at 34%. So it needs an expert report. The expert report's now out and is going through the ASIC approval, but that recommends the transaction. And so now it's just approval process. It needs to go to shareholders. That notice of meeting is with ASIC now. It will then put out to the public, and then we'll have a shareholders meeting in the moment it's targeted for the 20th of September. And then after that, we can start going ahead.
Yeah. Over the time, I've learned that. A good friend of mine, Jeff Donahue, did once tell me, there's always a run, Noel, but it will come back and it'll plateau out, and there's go runs like that, and that's when the market decides whether it's going to go like this or like that. I sort of, when I look at you guys, to me, you've got the financing. The Chinese group's obviously gone in there and they won the product. That journey, without preemptive, a result, you're probably looking like you're going to get that product out. You've got the funding sorted. To me, the price chart looks almost like the guys are at that plateau, sort of sussing you out.
Well, I think you're. Our shareholders have had a long suffering process. The company
joined the club.
Yeah, but went into in March 2016 and went into voluntary administration, and that was through actions of the previous management and board, and I was brought in to recapitalise it and fast track it into development. And so every time, the shareholders get nervous, every time your cash balance goes down, and I think they just want to have it all in place. And what we've announced now essentially does that, but I think once we announce we're actually started construction, and then people will get will now realise that this thing is the next graphite production facility coming on board in a market that the growth rates long term are higher than every other commodity that I know. In terms of we're talking between 15 and 30% compound average growth rates for the next 15 years. It's a market to be in, and as long as you're a good quality producer and you can get good revenue from it, then you'll make a lot of money. This thing has an MPV of for an $85 million capex of about 300 million. Pays back in 3 years, IRR close to 40%. Getting a mining project to have those returns is very unusual, and it's really just now getting the people to realise that this is now real, this is going to happen, and so we can't do much about people's perception other than deliver milestones, and that's what we've been concentrating on. And this was, to us, this announcement recently was a major milestone for the company, and now means that we're essentially de-risked.
Yeah, I think I like the process. The fact that you, like you said, that you got the financing done, and in 2015, I personally felt that was the time when I think the run had stopped and had the bounce, and I always said the next bounce is going to be more shallow. The wavelength's going to be much larger. Yeah. And I believe that's going to be the case.
Yeah, and you've seen runs happening, cobalt and lithium. Graphite since 2012 hasn't had a run. So to be
tried a few runs though.
2012 did.
Yeah.
But that really wasn't underpinned by the whole battery thematic.
Yeah, that's right.
And so it now is fundamentally, that the base on the battery side is huge and growing, but you're now, on top of that, you're getting environmental issues in China. The Chinese are now looking outside of China for their graphite.
Yeah.
We've been approached by a number of groups who now want to have an investment at a project level in projects outside of China, because they understand their grades going down, their environmental issues. Beforehand, they didn't have to deal with a lot of those environmental issues. But if you've got good quality, high through normal mechanical flotation process is getting great quality, great grade graphite, they're going to look outside, and that's what we're starting to see now. Syrah was the first one where it started to do that. Syrah had a different strategy to that, but we are targeting the high-end value market, and we're now leading the pack in the development of that.
It's interesting you said that. I picked it up when you mentioned this early in our conversation, but short-term memory issues. And good thing that you brought it up again, because I really wanted to touch on that, because a while ago I was talking to someone who was in the rare earth industry, and he said, you know what? The grades in China is actually extremely low. It's how they process it to bring the cost next to nothing, and then they can compete with what we have outside. But the way they do it has a lot of environmental sort of ramification, which what you're saying with the graphite. And I do believe when we were doing tungsten in 2012, 13, somewhere around there was already talk at that time, because everyone says, China's full of tungsten, you guys don't have any chance, blah, blah, blah. And then there's, we had the Hunan Nuclear Geology Bureau as shareholders, right? So they sort of knew what was going on. They said, with all the environmental thing, this is back then, almost 10 years ago, what was 0.1 was good. Now they need at least another 0.1 to make it workable.
Yeah, and there's lots of examples of that. So iron ore used to, there's been a huge amount of, I think there was 300 million tonnes of iron ore produced in China previously. It's now dropped away because of their grades were low, and so the environmental processes to get that up to, they were doing 11-13% iron ore grades and getting it up to the 60%.
Yep.
The calcine bauxite, they've stopped that because of the environment. They had to do a lot of washing and contamination of water. So most of a lot of commodities have had that challenge in China. And if you have a look at China is now winning its battle against with the environment, because the number of days of pollution in major
the only place where you can do that to the whole country, because
yeah,
everybody listens when they talk, right?
The disadvantages of that sort of structure to be able to make, and the government is serious about it. The same thing is happening in graphite is happening in so their environmental monitoring is increasing. They're making people actually do the full remediation of their process to make sure that they aren't harming the environment. And they're closing down facilities, and they make it more costly to do it because they don't really want it there because of the dangers it poses to their environment, and they're serious about that. And so, for a lot of them, they're saying, we either have to go into an industrial facility and do two-stage processing, or we need to look outside to get something. And I think that'll slowly occur, and that's why having projects located where we are is advantageous for both China and ourselves, because it will enable an alternative supply that is they can add value to in country, and then use it for their needs. And so that's why there's been a lot of Chinese interest. Constructors, financiers, off-takes, and now we've got Jinan High Tech, who are an SOE based in Jinan in Shandong province. They are a big building company, doing technology parks as well. And so they've seen the opportunity and done a lot of due diligence on our processes, and are now convinced enough to make what's a serious investment.
Mate, China, man, we're everywhere, man. McDonald's will be serving with chopsticks soon.
Well, and Mozambique has quite a large Chinese presence as well, because Sinopec has one of the shares of the gas field as well. So you've got lots of Chinese development there. Our constructor MCC International has done construction in Mozambique, so we're seeing a lot of work being done there. And China, Mozambique is a signatory to the One Belt One Road initiative. Lots of visits by Chinese high officials to Mozambique, and the president has had several trips to China about developing trade between the two countries.
Look, I Xi Jinping is so perceived in some ways as a big bad boy, but I think what he's doing in China is actually the only way you're going to do this. The Chinese they're very entrepreneurial, and they'd like to do their own thing, but you need someone with a big stick and say, boys, this is what we're going to do. I think that's what he's done, and it's good. As he pointed out, they're winning that environmental war of attrition. The One Belt One Road thing was a bit too lax at one stage, and I think he's tightened that up as well. Like, it has to make money, it has to make sense, and I think that's worked in your favour in the sense that your products actually things that they will support,
Yeah, and it supports. I mean, one of the things I think people miss about the One Belt One Road initiative, it's supporting development in Western China as well.
Yeah.
And so it takes some of the environmental pressures off the east coast of China. It has a development trade route that sits through the western part of China, and so it makes good business sense, not just for a political sense, but it makes business sense for the future of China, is to grow into South Asia and into East Africa, which is a natural trading route for them, and so I think it's a really good initiative. I think your point, it needs to make money, is true, but just the economic development keeps their economy going as well at a time where it was starting to plateau a little bit, and they need the economy to keep being strong. And this is an initiative that actually grows into the value-adding stage. The second stage of development of China is not just the urbanisation of 300 million people. It's then the next phase is they all want air conditioners. And that's the high-tech materials such as copper and then the graphite, where you're going to need to support that second generation of economic development, and they're in it now. And so I think it's a great initiative. Most the companies MCC who deal with have a whole department for One Belt One Road. They're being told be up and ready to support this because it is happening.
Oh no, I mean when I always said China's not about developing the East Coast, the big cities, because there's another 2/3 of the country that wants the same thing, and there's another probably
one time zone.
Yeah, one time zone, exactly, one time zone. Well, Peter, we could go on forever, I guess, but thanks for giving me time. I think we covered a lot of interesting topics. I mean, I actually have a lot more appreciation for graphite, the business, but we'll keep in touch.
Thanks.
All right?
Appreciate
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks for your time.
Okay.